have had, little experience in Tenkara, can you raise your hand? Where maybe you've seen it, or you just have, you've maybe tried it once or twice. I don't know if people know how to raise their hand. It's down at the bottom of their screen.
Reactions, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, you had 3,
Have
4.
A couple.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, from the people that have used Tenkara, is it mostly small streams? Can you raise your hand if you've used mostly or seen it in small streams and small water? Okay. All right. All right. Well, we're gonna get going, if that's okay.
So if you're here, you should be at Fish Geometry, how it helps you play and manage fish. And our speaker is, you are, I hope I've been saying Karin and you're not Karin, since you're
Karin.
Well, thank God, because I was like, wouldn't it be cool if she was Karin? But anyway, she's the owner and founder of Zen Tenkara. It is the first and only 100% women-owned rod company and manufacturer in the world. She began it in 2012, and she designs premium Tenkara rods, and is quite the innovator. She fishes both Tenkara and traditional rod and reel, and she loves to travel the globe. She's setting records. And let me tell you, you will figure out, she has a lot of excitement, a lot of passion. And she will tell you things about Tenkara that you never heard. She is revolutionized it. And Karin, I believe you're giving, I don't have it offhand. Yes, I do. You're giving another Tenkara talk tomorrow, 2:00 Central, 3:00 Eastern, if you want to look at that one too. So I gave you a little plug.
Thanks.
We are recording this, so if you don't want your beautiful and handsome faces seen, take yourself off of video. We're going to go through the talk, but chat is open. If you came in through Whova, use chat and not Q&A, because Q&A doesn't come over in a timely fashion. Use chat, and we'll address all the questions after. And then Karin opened up a meeting room if you want to get together and discuss everything we talked about, and just, rave about this talk, and the moderator and the speaker. And that you're going to go to your Whova check-in site where your agenda is. Go down to, what was it, Karin? Communication. Community. And in there it says meetups. Let me see what it says.
Virtual meetup, I think.
Virtual meetings. Because I think Meetups is a hookup app, so don't go there. Dear God in heaven. And I'm going to community, and it is called Meetups and Virtual Meets. And in there, there is a meetup site for today's talk, and probably tomorrow's too, right, Karin?
Yeah, they're two separate meetups. So anything that doesn't get addressed in this presentation, we can follow up and talk about it in the virtual meetup room. I'll stay in there as long as I can, and check in and out of there throughout the day, because I know you also have other meetings.
And be sure to if it doesn't come up on a slide, be sure to share your website.
Yep. All
right. The floor is yours.
Okay, everybody. So, we are going to talk about what I refer to as fish geometry. And it really came about because when I first got involved in Tenkara, I was getting a lot of resistance from the industry and shop owners, and those kind of personalities in the fly fishing world. And on more than one occasion, Tenkara was referred to as sort of fly fishing for dummies, right? It was fly fishing for people who didn't have the skills to cast. And one day I had somebody say, go land a bonefish on your Tenkara rod and then come back and we can talk. So I thought, okay, I've never landed a bonefish before. I had never gone saltwater fly fishing before, but I thought, that's what it takes. I think I can do that. So I headed to Florida and started my journey down saltwater fly fishing, which I will tell you is it's a no return situation. But I had success. I not only landed bonefish, but I landed barracudas, and I was landing shark, and I was landing Jack Crevelli, and I was having a lot of success. And it wasn't just coincidence that I was being successful, like one lucky landing. It was repeated, consistent success. And so I started wondering, how am I doing this? And I really did not have the ability to explain or talk about it to anglers who were asking me and saying, this is impossible. And I'm going to share screen back and forth with you. So I hope that's okay. So people were telling me, this is impossible, right? That there's no way that you're able to land a bonefish without a reel. And it made me stop to think about how was I doing this? How was I having success, and what was happening? So one day I was going through some photos and editing some video, shortening the clips and things like that. And I was going through the video frame by frame. And as I was doing this, I had this really unique perspective of being able to watch me respond to the fish. I was able to see what I was doing with my rod. And I had this unique perspective of also internally being able to relive the moment and recall exactly what was happening and what it felt like and what was going through my mind, and then see on the video how I responded to that. And I had this sort of epiphany, this aha moment, this revelation of, oh my gosh, I see it. I see what is happening. I remember what the fish was doing. And now I can see exactly how I responded physically and with my rod. And I started to see what I refer to as triangles, fishing triangles everywhere. And this triad kept reappearing in all of my fishing photos, between the angler, the fish, and the rod tip. And any time that I was connected with a fish, this triangle appeared over and over again, whether I was doing saltwater or freshwater, or whether I was on a float trip in Wyoming on my Tenkara rod. Over and over again, I had these 3 points of connections. Even when I was in Alaska, it didn't matter if I was doing bonefish or if I was doing Dolly Varden, this triangle appeared. And what I realized was that depending on what type of triangle that I created, whether it was a right degree triangle like this with a nice open right angle, or at least an angle of 90 degrees, or whether that angle was reduced and I started to lose the space between my rod tip and the fish, determined exactly how much control I had. So the more that I was in a position with roughly a 90-degree angle, the more control I had over the fish. When that fish decided to take off and run and that angle closed, I lost control. And over again, when I examined photos, that same theory happened. And so I figured there had to be something to this. So when I started pondering this, I thought, was this just unique to Tenkara? Or was this something that also mattered, when I was on a rod and reel? And what I realized is it happened the same if I was on a rod and a reel, but my choices and my options of dealing with it were different. So when I'm on a rod and reel and I connect with a fish, right? I'm in this triad, and I have a nice solid roughly 90-degree triangle. And if you look at this diagram, I have those 3 points: the angler, the fish, and my rod tip. And then I've color coded this diagram. So the green color represents what I call the control zone, or power positions. When my rod is in that green zone, generally speaking, I have a lot of control over the fish. As that zone changes and my rod moves in relation to the fish, then I get into the yellow and the orange area, which I refer to as your warning areas. It's warning, warning, something is happening here, and you are beginning to lose control. The red color is angles at which, if my rod were along those lines, I would have relatively no control over the fish whatsoever. If the fish runs on a rod and reel, generally my rod tip lowers and my control over the fish is reduced. Now, I do have some control because I have a reel, and that reel allows me to keep tension through the drag system on the fish, right? So you're either opening up your drag and releasing all the tension, in which case, especially for those who do salt water, your guide will yell, tighten down your drag. You have no drag, right? Because at that point, you have no control when the fish is running. But as the fish runs and starts to tire, essentially, right? Then it's your cue to start reeling. And as you start reeling in that line, you begin to bring your rod tip back up. And this process happens over and over and over again, right? Until you bring the fish in. So it's a matter of that fish running, you're losing an amount of control and you're lowering your tip to let line off. And then as that fish gets tired or pauses, you're reeling and you're bringing it back up, and you're doing this repeatedly, right? So whether you're working from a position up here with your rod, or you're working to the side, those angles and that triangle still exists. It's just on a different plane. So versus a plane this way, your plane is off to the side, and that looks like this. So this is back, bringing the fish in. When you have control and you're landing the fish, you're bringing the rod tip way back and you're bringing the fish in. There you've got still roughly about a 90-degree angle. I like to say about 100 and, about 120 to about 65 degrees is your sweet spot. When you lay the rod over, again, you're still creating those triangles, and you still have those control zones and those warning zones. The difference is you're playing to the side, either to the left or to the right. So what happens on Tenkara when that fish runs, right? You don't have line for that fish to take when your rod lowers and straightens out. On a Tenkara rod, what if the fish runs? And that is the big question that everybody asks. Well, when the fish runs on Tenkara, and that angle starts to close between your rod tip and the fish, you don't have as many choices. You essentially have two choices, and that is you can control or you can steer the fish. In Tenkara, running is never, ever, ever, ever an option unless it's you who's running and not the fish. So what does that look like? And what I love about this is these are foundational skills. These are foundational fish management skills that what I find is too often regular rod and reel anglers do not use enough of, okay? So on Tenkara, when that fish starts to come into what I call the warning zone, right? I've got to either control it or I've got to steer it. And it is the same principle in Tenkara as in regular fly fishing. If any of you have taken a guided trip, and when you hook into something big and the guide will say, point the rod opposite the fish, right? Bring that rod to the other side. Well, the reason you're doing that is because your goal is to maintain that fishing triangle. And in doing so, you're keeping and maintaining pressure on the fish. So when that fish starts to run, okay, and that angle starts to close, you have to either move your body to reposition yourself or move the rod. As the fish in this diagram starts to move out and to the left, I'm going to bring my rod over to the right. And in doing so, I'm maintaining the fishing triangle. I'm just reestablishing it on the opposite side of the fish now. And if you'll notice, the colors have changed, okay? Because now my control zone is in a different spot because the fish is moved. So now I either need to be off to the left or off to the right, depending on which way the fish is heading. And you continue to do that throughout the play to manage the fish. So even throughout landing, you're doing that same process. And this is a very short video, but I want you to see that throughout the entire process of this landing, I am maintaining that triangle. And you'll also notice that I am keeping my rod at about a 45-degree angle. And before I show you that, I just want to show you this really quick. I think you can see it. Let's see. Can you see this wonderful picture that I've drawn?
Yes.
I'm very artistic. So this is a no-no. This is what I call turning the fly rod, the Tenkara rod, into a candy cane. And the reason that this is such a no-no is because you're overloading this top section. So if I work from up here, from up above, okay, then I'm not engaging the lower section of my rod, which is the backbone, the beefiest part of any rod, including a Tenkara rod. So I want to spread the load and distribute that fish along the entire length of the rod. And I can't do it if I'm up here. Because up here, the more I bring my rod back, the straighter this section is going to be. And all the pressure is going to be right up in here. And that's where I'm going to get a break. So you'll notice in this picture, I keep the rod at an angle and off to the side. I can monitor and make sure that my rod isn't turning into a candy cane, and I can maintain that triangle. And if you can see here, if you just use your imagination, I have one point here, another point the fish, another point my rod tip. All right. Now in this video, you're going to see that the fish is going to be moving towards the right of the screen. And there's a log there. And so I flip the rod over, as in this diagram, in order to move him in the opposite direction. So let's just take a little look. There's that log that he wants to get wrapped around, as fish like to do. And I'm maintaining that open angle. And I'm going to land it by grabbing the line and going in. This is what I call a helicopter move. But he's moving towards the left and getting very close to that rod. So I simply turn the rod over. He doesn't move any farther and grab the line. And it's as simple as that. And this, you'll see, is a pretty good sized fish. It's a dolly, and it's about a, I don't know, probably a 22-inch dolly, maybe a 24-inch dolly. There's more video of that on our YouTube, as well as in the material included. But just again, for you to see, it's as simple as the fish is moving to the right of the screen. I don't want to close that angle off. So I have to apply pressure on the left, since he is moving to the right, and all the time keeping steady pressure, and grab the line. There it is. So when the fish runs, you need to keep that steady pressure all the time. you need to realize that if the fish moves, your area of control moves. So if this fish runs straight, I'm going to lose him. My choice is to control or steer. And in order to do that, I might have to take a step or two forward and then flip the rod simultaneously to either the left or the right, depending on which way the fish is moving, and reestablish my triangle. This is what a Tenkara rod looks like when you're losing control. You'll see that the rod, I'm really barely engaging the rod. It's almost completely straight. And I have no power over the fish at this point. Here, you can see I'm reestablishing control. The rod still isn't in a full curve, but you'll notice that down here, I'm really engaging the lower part of that rod. I'm putting, it's what I call giving the fish butt, or when people say point the handle of the rod at the fish, the reason you're doing that is to get into that fish triangle and reestablish that. So with force and the backbone of that rod, I can flip that rod around and flip the rod over. And it takes a second. This is what that looks like. Very, very quickly. I kind of put it into a slow-mo and pause it halfway through just so you can see. It comes over. I take a few steps forward to give myself some leeway and pull back. Simple as that. So the fish starts to run and I have to turn him back around by flipping over to the other side. Very, very fast. So what I like to say is, because people will say, I don't understand how this works. And I have explained to people, this is exactly what you do when you're on a rod and reel. It's no different. The difference with Tenkara is that you're doing it from the get-go. You have no option ever of letting the fish run. So you're always maintaining control. And this is why I truly feel everybody should spend some amount of time on a Tenkara rod, because it will skyrocket your fish management skills. So let me give you a scenario. You're on a river, you've got a strong current, right? And you've got this fish and you hook into it. And what does that big fat rainbow want to do? But he wants to take off and he wants to jump into that heavy current and into that deeper water, and he's going to cruise, right? Well, in 99% of the scenarios, you're going to get him on your reel as quickly as possible, right? And then, right, your reel's going to scream and he's going to jump or do his thing. And now you're on the reel and you're letting him run and you're playing and you've got a solid connection now, right? What happens if there's a bunch of wood or a tree down river? Where's that fish going? You know that fish is heading right to that down tree or that pile of logs. That's exactly where the fish wants to go. He wants to hide, he wants to bury himself, he wants to get all tangled and break off that line or that hook. Well, in a scenario like that, you cannot let the fish run. So what do? You do exactly what you would do on Tenkara. You're using fish geometry. You are using angles to steer and manage the fish. And you're actually using the fish's own momentum and power to turn the fish. All right. You can't let that fish take any more line. You've got to stop that reel. And when you stop that reel, the fish is still moving. So you turn him around, and that is what this looks like. And again, I had an aha moment when I saw this diagram. But here we have somebody on a rod and reel. We've got the strong current and we have an obstruction down here. Well, you can't just pull back on the fish. And I promise I am not a math professor or a math geek or science geek, but for every force, there's an opposite and equal force. I believe that was some science theory that I learned in middle school or in high school, right? For every force, there's an opposite and equal force. So if I just pull back here, I'm not going to do anything with that fish. If anything, he'll probably go into the current and I'll break him off. So what I need to do is get him into the soft water. So as I said, you're going to stop the line and you're going to use the fish's own momentum to turn him towards the left, away from the obstruction. And this you're doing on a rod and reel. Well, on a Tenkara rod, you're doing the same thing. You're bringing that rod over to the left side to bring the fish around using his own momentum. And you're doing this if that fish gets ahead of you. This is the maneuver. Should you lose control over that fish, even for a millisecond, then your only other option is to steer, right? Because I said we had two options on Tenkara, control or steer. So if I lose control over the fish, then I better start steering. And I'm going to use this fish judo method to use the fish's own momentum to bring him back to the left. And then when I bring the fish to the left, as I begin to lose pressure on the fish as he moves to the left because my rod is in the left, then I have to bring my rod back to the right, because in that moment, I have to reestablish that triangle. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. So when we talk about fish geometry, we're utilizing a 90-degree fishing triangle or thereabouts to apply steady pressure opposite the fish, engaging the whole rod, not just the tip section, but the whole rod, then using the fish's own momentum to steer and turn it in order to stay in the control zone of the triangle for improved fish management. And if you do this, you will always be able to maintain control. So I really feel like these are important skill sets that not enough anglers utilize. And I think, especially if we get into a conversation of conservation and, healthy fish practice, I think today's equipment is incredible. And too often anglers rely on their reel rather than their skill set to manage fish. And they play fish longer than they need to play them. Everybody loves the sound of a reel screaming, but bringing that fish in quickly and safely is really important. And Tenkara shows you how to do it, whether you are on a rod and a reel or whether you're on a Tenkara rod. It's the same foundational skills. So that is essentially my presentation. I don't know if it's exactly what you were hoping for, but if you have other questions or any questions, please reach out and ask away, raise your hand. So
you've got one in chat from William, and he wants to know, how long is your line on your saltwater Tenkara fishing?
On average, it is a 28-foot line with a 10 to 12-foot leader. So that gives me, 38 to 40 feet on a 12 to 15-foot rod. So
yeah,
I'm
and
out there.
What pound test is that line?
So the line in that particular photo is one of our fusion lines, and I had a 20-pound test leader on that. For bonefish, like in Belize and Bahamas, I will often use like a 16-pound test. Never less than 12. Well, I should say, in Mexico, like Ascension Bay, the bonefish tend to be a little smaller there. And so I can often get away with, like a 10-pound test on a Tenkara rod, because you do have bigger, that initial bigger hit impact. So often you have to up the tippet just a little bit. But for, as I said, Bahamas, Seychelles, Honduras, I'm usually a 16-pound test. That picture was in the Seychelles. We were also targeting bluefin on Tenkara. And so I had, I believe, a 20-pound test on that setup.
Christy, you had a question. Do you want to unmute and ask it, or do you want to? It's a good question. Nope, she's muted. Let's see if I can get her to. Yeah. There we go.
There we go. So I had to leave for a minute, so I apologize if you presented this already. But our steelhead tend to run at us.
Those darn fish.
So you could only raise the rod tip so far, so fast. And if you don't have the reel to rely on, if you're using Tenkara, how do you manage the fish when it's coming at you faster than you can bring the line?
Well, I will say that's probably the most difficult situation to be in. Even in saltwater, I've had bonefish come right at me and you're like, oh, geez, and if you're on a flat, you can run. Can't
do that on a steelhead river.
Right. And you can't do that on a steelhead river. And so, those are those moments where you're kind of like, oh my God, am I screwed? And so the only thing you can do is lift that rod up as far and back as you can. Now, I have also, with a bonefish, when it is come like directly at me, I have grabbed the line momentarily, grabbed it, and then slowly let it go. Now, when you do that, you have to be careful because you risk breaking the rod when you do that, right? By putting too much tension in that top section when you pull the rod, until you can release it and the fish goes and you can get back, so to speak, on the reel or on the full length of the rod. So that is, I say all the time, if you're going to target big fish on Tenkara, you've got to be willing to lose a fish now and then. I mean, we all lose fish, even on rods and reels, but what you learn from that loss is incredible, because that's it. You're drawing from that skill set because you don't have that tool, that piece of equipment on your line. So can I take 3 steps, quickly down the river to regain that space? I don't know. Maybe you can, maybe you can't, but it's problem solving in the heat of the moment that I think really pushes you to be, for that moment, you know, in time, an extraordinary angler, because you've solved a problem or done your very best, figured out what the very best option is at that moment, in that situation. And sometimes there just isn't a good solution. So that's you know, that's the honest truth.
Sometimes fish win.
They do, those darn fish.
Thank you.
But it makes a great story. Are there any other questions?
No, you got a lot of compliments in chat.
Oh, well, thank you.
Good presentation and incredible. And yeah, you're just such a dynamic speaker. I mean, it's just fun to listen.
Well, it's very dynamic, fishing without a reel. And as I said, oh, I'm sorry, was there somebody asking a question?
No.
Oh, okay. And it's humbling, as I said, to lose fish. You have to let go of that piece of pride every now and then. But it is very interesting when you do lose a fish on a Tenkara rod to go back and analyze, you know, what did I do wrong? What did I fail at? What could I have done differently? Would it have impacted the outcome at all? You know, would I have had success? And I think when you reflect at that level, understanding the rod dynamics and that fishing triangle, then it really allows you to analyze the situation and learn from it, which is what, you know, we all want to do while we're having a whole lot of fun. So
well, we have a couple minutes left. Why don't you give everybody your website so they can go check it out, Karin?
Yeah, so also just to say, feel free if you ever have a question regarding Tenkara or rod and reels. I'm happy to talk anything that has to do with fish. My email address is, I believe, in the little section for material, and I do have a couple of those videos and those diagrams up if you want to look at them later and, you know, sort of ponder them or chew on them. They're there for your use. But my personal email is Karin, and I'm Karin with an I, Karin, at Zen, Zen, flyfishinggear.com. And I am the owner of Zen Tenkara, and our website is zentenkara.com. So reach out to me anytime, and I would love to talk fish with you. So thank you. And we will go into a little bit more, if you want to know more of the how-tos of Tenkara, in tomorrow's session.
Right.
So.
And that's 2:00 Central. And you all can change the time on the home screen in Whova to your local time, because everything is in East Coast time. So I know people have missed their talk. So 2:00 Central, whatever time zone, that's tomorrow.
Yeah.
If you want more Tenkara talk.
If you want more Tenkara talk. More math.
More math. I love it.
All right.
I think I know how my husband broke our Tenkara rod now.
Well, it's, you know, and every rod is different as far as their flex profile. So I always encourage people to play with their rod and, you know, tie, you know, especially if they're targeting something larger, you know, it doesn't take a whole lot of skill to drag an 8-inch trout across a riverbed. But if you're going to get into, you know, a 22-inch trout or a steelhead or, you know, a char or something like that, it definitely takes skill. So you need to tie your line on your rod, attach it to, you know, something a fence post or, you know, something, a piece of furniture, and pull on it a little and apply pressure and really take a look at where and how your rod flexes so that you can get into that power position in that full flex mode quickly and instinctually if you're targeting bigger fish. So I'll move into the virtual meeting
Go
room.
to the virtual meetup room, everybody, and find Karin again. And Karin, you know, we'll be talking later. I'll see you later. All right.
All right.
Okay. Thanks for coming,
Thank you,
everybody.
everybody.
Enjoy the
Thank you,
rest of your
Karin.
afternoon.
All right. Bye-bye
Thank you
now.
so much.